Well, welcome to The Journey. My name is Kevin Polkey, and I am the host of The Journey. And today we have a special guest, Clark Kelly. Clark and I have known each other. We were talking about this the other day. It's been more than a couple years.
That's right.
You were in, I believe, in high school, maybe even entering in high school when we first met. And obviously, you've had lots of different adventures since then. But we'll get into those in just a moment. But so Clark, as I always ask guests that come on, when you have an opportunity to have fun, what do you do for fun?
Well, Kevin, I was born and raised in a ping pong family. So I would say that that's something I always look forward to, and that has turned into like darts and bowling and any sort of those like small kind of motor skills types of games I love, like a little bit of competition. So yeah, that's something I always enjoy and look forward to.
Gotcha. It is always interesting, like right now it seems like the very popular thing to do is play pickleball,
That's
right?
right. I was gonna
Yeah,
say that too.
yeah, and so the ping pong, right, has been in the round here. It's been around forever, right? And then
Mhm.
I remember getting introduced to when I was in high school. We had a I guess they called it units or whatever, a time period where we played badminton.
Okay.
And for whatever reasons, I more gravitated toward badminton versus tennis, and I have not had the opportunity to play pickleball yet. But I imagine it's kind of all in the same kind of family.
It is, right. And I was thinking about that the other day that like everyone in my family will have like tournaments and everyone can like hold their own, you
Okay.
know? Nobody's like a gimme.
Yeah.
So it's so much fun and you adjust to each player like it just requires those tiny adjustments. Yeah, and changing in your game. I don't know. It's subtle, but it's such a focusing thing. It seems silly, but yeah, I really enjoy those moments of complete attention to what you're doing. Even, ping pong might seem kind of silly, but it does kind of, yeah, like clear your mind, I guess, in a certain way.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is definitely something about that in the midst of, as we know, with in the digital age and the with all the aspects of social media and different things, there's so many different things about thinking that we can, multitask, meaning like we can do more than one thing at the same time.
Yeah.
An activity like ping pong or badminton or pickleball or tennis, we very quickly find out, nope, you can't.
Yeah. My mind can't be wandering to keep up with my Uncle Kip's serve, I have to be very focused,
Yeah,
not hitting it
exactly.
off the table with that spin. So yes, that's exactly right.
Exactly. So yeah, kind of talking about family and childhood. Tell us a little bit where you grew up. What were some of the things that you were into besides the activities such as like ping pong and those types of activities. What types of things, tell us a little bit about you growing up and a little bit about your family, and then what things were your interests were in.
Yeah, so I grew up in Rockford, born and raised in Rockford, and yeah, I don't know if I would say I come from a musical family. I come from a family that like definitely appreciates music and there's kind of casual relationships with it. Um, but yes, I'm very lucky that, the older I get, to realize like I come from a very supportive family and um, like a very solid foundation. So I don't know. I found my way into music, which I'm sure we'll talk about, through kind of plays at school, that sort of thing, or at the church, and that was always fun. I played sports a little bit, but my brother, Drake, he's ginormous. He's like three times the size that I am, and he was always very good. So I think in some ways I kind of had to find my own path because I wasn't really going to compete with him. So I found my way into music. Started taking guitar lessons when I was 10, and it just caught fire. So I would say from that moment on, that has been the focus and my passion. And I think we've talked about it before. I'm so grateful that my mother kind of realized I was being pulled into that, and they got me, a cheap guitar, got me some lessons just to see how deep that went, and like it was off to the races for me. So that's something that when I see, in parents or like in my partner, when there's that the attention to, your child being drawn to something that you put a little water on that and see how deep it goes. And it's for me, it was like I was way ahead of the game because I started, so early. And I'm just so grateful for that. And like I said, my family was passionate enough about music that they understood it to some level and could support it and encourage me, at the beginning when I'm like trying to write songs and have no idea what I'm doing. I'm sure it was horrible, but everyone was just like, keep going. They kind of understood the importance of it, especially my mother.
Yeah. Well, and I and I remember, yeah, 100%. I mean, not only when we first met, but then as you got older, then you had some opportunities to start playing out. And I just remember, being in those areas and your mom encouraging people to attend those events, and then she of course
That's
she of course
probably a nice way of putting it.
yeah.
Encouragement. You're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. I'll see you there, right?
That's right.
But it was very much an aspect of that, people that would go to those shows that I remember, at least locally, there was that family friend basis of support. And so
Hmm.
I think that's encouraging. And again, no different than going to watch Drake play football or, or whatever might have been. So I think that's kind of cool. And it reminds me of, to your point about starting younger and finding something that you kind of get that pulls at you. Sierra, our youngest, she started the summer before she was 7. So the summer before she turned 8, she went to her first theater camp.
Hmm.
It was for CYT, a Christian Youth Theater, and it was the very first one that was in the Rockford area. She was very shy, but she liked it. And then she was in her first show that fall, the very first show that was in the Rockford area for that organization. And
Hmm.
then you got, 10 years later, in that organization, you can only be in it from 8 to 18. And they put on 3 shows a year. And so by the time she's 18, graduating from high school, she's already been in 30, pushing 40 shows by the time you're 18 years old. That's a lot of experience
Hmm.
where some people like you, like as you know, if you start practicing and start playing at 10, by the time you're 18, 20 years old, that's 10 years of experience. There's a lot of clocked hours there. And I think that's where that mastery comes
Hmm.
from an aspect. There's something about doing something for that extended amount of time that you just start developing certain things and can start being innovative and creative and finding your flow.
That's a great point. And I think a big part of that, especially maybe in everything, but especially in like creative fields, is like your identity. Like the more Sierra did that, the more I did it. I kind of realized how I like I developed preferences. Yeah, I kind of, sounds silly, but like I found the way that I worked at, 12 years old, but I do feel like you're not fully formed, but you're forming. And that's such a big part of creative expression is kind of knowing who you are and being able to express that. So yeah, that was a big part of it. And as you know, like driving her to practices and all of that is a sacrifice for the parent. And you never know what that's going to turn into. Like my brother was super into sports, and I think that discipline and that support from my mom. Now he's a businessman, but I'm sure all of that kind of started the commitment, chipping away at something, rising to the occasion. Like you never know what that's going to turn into. And I'm thankful for me. It was what it was. When I was 10, it ended up being it wasn't a pathway to something else, which that's just as valid. But I continue to chip away and focus and find my identity, as a songwriter and as a musician. I'm just so grateful for her attention to seeing me being pulled into that. But it started with theater, like we said, and then that turned into music. So very great, very, very grateful for that. I see that as not like a given,
Well, and I think even though obviously in our country sports are so popular, and
Mhm.
and it seems like most parents can kind of easily fall into that kind of that trap or trance of in wanting to at least start there, engaging, involved with sports because it's just such part of our culture.
That's
Um,
right.
but sports as from a player, from a coach, from a fan, I see sports as definitely a metaphor for life, where the arts, yes, it definitely is a metaphor for life as well, but you can be involved with the arts and be creative throughout your whole life, where with sports it's a little bit more of a
That's
finite,
a good point.
you
That's
know
that's a good point.
even Tom Brady retired eventually, I mean,
Yeah.
and so we have this aspect of at least the competitive aspect of it. You may evolve into coaching or promoting or whatever it may be, but I think with arts as a whole, you only in some ways almost get better with age. Almost it matures and develops in time, and age is to a benefit.
Hmm.
Um, as you're as it's as you as an artist are evolving, your craft is evolving. I think it builds upon itself. Where with sports, I think there is an element where it's going to be a season, a time period, and then it's really about, is this preparing you for something out, or are you only allowing it to be finite for that activity?
That's right. And the competitive drive you can fill that into,
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that's a great point. Like I said with my brother, it's like he just wanted to compete and he wanted to win. And now he does that, selling insurance and running his own agency. So
yeah.
uh, yeah.
Yeah. So when you think going back to being a young person, and this just started kind of like as you're trying to find out who Clark is and where do you fit in, what do you when you reflect back and what do you think it was about music, right? Uh,
Mhm.
about via at that time guitar. What do you think it was about that kind of hooked you?
Well, as you referenced, kind of middle school, um, it was just a tough period, like in my family. And So I think the music thing was always there, but I think the expression part of it uh, really became beneficial to me when I just felt a bit lost and confused at home with like what was going on. I remember, one of my first songs was, was just like kind of the chorus of it was just like take me out of this situation, you know. So I just, yeah, that's another thing I'm so grateful for is that, music and just this whole journey started in it during a time when I really needed it. And it gave me clarity and expression. And it just was a way to kind of funnel what was going on. So my relationship with it started as, like I need this and it's an escape from me. It's a way to like process what's going on as much as I knew how to as like a 12-year-old. Um, so that's when it really started. Yeah, kind of out of necessity.
Sure. And then, kind of like, we were talking about, your brother happened to, be successful enough and talented enough and hard enough working in high school that he went on and played for the time period in college,
That's
right?
right.
But but again, like many things, the small percentage comparatively to the percentage that plays youth football or youth sports, a smaller percentage plays varsity,
Mhm.
and even a smaller percentage plays at the collegiate level. And then we're talking a, 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 a fraction of that is what's playing at what we call the professional level, right?
Mhm.
And but for you, when you think of your journey with music, right? You have had the opportunity to do some things with your music that, it went from just appreciating music, listening to music, playing some things. You've also had a kind of your own journey of being able to explore a little bit. So maybe talk a little bit about that and what you did, post high school and beyond.
Yeah, so I think it kind of comes back to that competitive thing that we were talking about before, which I don't know if I really realized how deep it went inside of me. So I in high school I went to Boylan. I put out like a little acoustic, a couple of songs, maybe my junior year that I had written, and I was just so grateful for the response from my classmates. And then I'd like be at a party with another school, and like my demo had made its way to them. Like everybody was burning CDs back then. I don't know if you remember CDs, Kevin. Um, but it was really affirming for me. And I don't think I put that out like wanting to take over the world. I just was excited about these songs. And, that was when John Mayer was really taking off. So there was like such a singer songwriter thing that was happening culturally. So that gave me a nice boost, maybe to be like, maybe I can do this. Like, the support. So I moved to Nashville. I went to a college called Belmont University, which is maybe top two music schools in the country. Um, and I'd gone to study composition, but yeah, I kind of got the push to give it a shot in Nashville, and realized very quickly like I was a big fish in a small pond. If I'm going to keep up, I have to really focus and get better. I remember they would do these showcases at school, or you'd submit your songs, and then these judges that worked in the industry would break your songs down, and then like you would whatever be able to play for the whole school, which was like a couple of thousand people, whatever. So when I first got there, it was like, oh, I have to play in one of these showcases, and the first semester I submitted my stuff, and they like ripped it to shreds, and in Rockford they were like the best songs ever, so that was a humbling moment. But the competitor in me was like, I doubled down, I focused. Just being in Nashville and seeing the level of greatness and just like soaking it in was so helpful for me. So I'm so grateful I moved to a competitive place where I could see where the level was at that I needed to get to be in the mix. So yeah, after a few years, I did like end up playing in one of those showcases, which was awesome. And yeah, um, just continued to try to keep building and focusing, and yeah, getting like a better like lay of the land, what it took to accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish.
Well, I think that, I'm glad you shared that part of the story about, going down to Belmont and having your songs entered into that, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, oh, okay, and it's like it's a what do you want to call it? Ego checking. It's humbling. It's hard to hear that type of stuff. And then at the same time later, you can see how instrumental it is because that competitiveness is going to go, all right, all right. And you kind of like grit your teeth a little bit and going, all right, that stung, but okay, what can I learn from this?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm sure you can relate. Of in those moments, you have an opportunity to be like, am I going to say like they're wrong, and because I don't want my ego's like getting in the way, or am I going to take parts of it? Because as we talked about earlier with identity, like you can't lose that. So like, what am I adjusting? How much am I holding firm? And taking in the feedback. So that's like such a balancing act in itself. But yeah, I certainly, as an 18-year-old, didn't have a lot of ground to stand on in terms of experience or what I knew. But yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I think that, again, these are all those moments, when, as we talked, last week, is all these moments where people they either double down and they're going to go, okay, what do I need to do to learn from this?
Mm-hmm.
Or they go, no, this isn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
And they take their toys and they go home,
Yeah.
and again, that taking their toys and go home could look a lot of different ways, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
can stay on campus and really kind of just check out and phone it in. You could, drink their Kool-Aid and want to be, appease them, or you, like you said, hang on to what is Clark and who you are, but then also learn from what they're trying to show you. And
Yeah.
I think there's a and it's never it's never clean, right? It's never a
Hmm.
straight line. I mean, it's messy. It's always messy.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm giving myself a lot of credit here because I didn't like the next day be like, all right, like I'm gonna take over Nashville. So that was my freshman year in the summer, before I was supposed to come back for my sophomore year. I was telling my mom, I was like, I do not want to go back. You know, I it just like I was far, like all my friends went to U of I, everyone stayed close. I was in the middle of nowhere by myself. Like it was just it was difficult. And my mom was like, Clark, give it one more semester. One more semester. So that would have been the first semester of my sophomore year. And what's ironic is like the summer before I went back, I got hit by a drunk driver. And it was like my car was totaled. It was just like a strange, I don't really know how that works into the story, but just a weird aspect of that chapter. And then I get back to school. I have in my mind like, all right, I'm kind of doing this for my mom. We'll see what happens. And that's the fall of that semester. I got into a showcase. I won that showcase and was playing at the end of the year for like all my peers, and got in touch with some music business people that were interested in me. Like I kind of had to get over some weird hump, like literally and physically, with that car crash. Like something was kind of standing in the way, but you know, my with my mom's encouragement and sticking with it. But yeah, it was just a lot of ups and downs, you know.
Yeah. And I think, again, I when I think of things when they come too easy, right? Because of
Mm-hmm.
whatever the circumstances, a big fish in a small pond syndrome, or whatever it may be. I remember, when I was bodybuilding, there was no other teenagers around here at that time
Huh.
here that were my age. And I got my first show when I was 15 years old. And so
Huh.
there was nobody. And I go into this teenage, Mr. Illinois that was in Chicago, in Harvey, Illinois, and there was 19 or 20 guys that were 16 and younger just in my class. I went,
Hmm.
where'd these guys come from?
Hmm.
And all Chicago, of course, but I mean, and
Yeah.
and I got third place.
Hmm.
And
Good
then
for you.
in the second year I compete, I get third place. I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, you're not Arnold, because Arnold never got less than second place.
Hmm.
But and then it happened to be that I then won like, three or four shows in a row after that and overall titles and stuff. But it was that thing of perspective, and what did I need to learn to do different? What was I missing? What was I not putting together? What still
Uh,
needed to be developed? The desire to succeed in that particular activity was there the whole time, even though
hmm.
there were some reality checks along the way early on, in spite of where I thought I was coming from. And
Hmm.
but it was good. And it was also great to have that happen, that when I did win a national title, I also knew I had learned enough about those early experiences that I wasn't any different when I came back, after winning the Mr. USA, than I was when I got third in the Teenage Illinois, that I was still the same person. You know,
Okay. I'm
it,
not sure I get what you mean by that because obviously you had dialed in and put, you mean like at your core?
what I mean by that is, you can have a moment of setback or a moment of success, but that's a finite thing that happens based upon that day, that night,
Okay.
that judging panel, that competition you have, and you still got to go back to the gym on Monday to train for the next show.
Oh,
And
and continue to prove yourself.
exactly. And
Yeah.
no one's going to bow down just because you won the last show,
That's
or
right. Okay.
yeah.
That's exactly right. And I think you're saying what I was saying before of like I'm just so if you would have stayed in Rockford, you being the only one, like you go to Chicago and you're inspired, you're challenged by other people doing it. And I'm just any like musicians around here that are young guys, I'm like, man, get out of here. Like go see what you're made of, challenge yourself. Like I don't know. That seems like such an important part of the journey and growth, is to go where people are doing it and better than you and soak in what you can and take notes, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And so you graduate from Belmont, right?
Mhm.
And finish up there. You got some opportunities that are coming at this point. You're in your early 20s. What's that what's that next chapter?
So Kevin, it was a lot more all over the place. So I had some opportunities probably in the middle of college, and then by the time I was graduating, like there really wasn't a lot. Um, so I actually moved out to Utah and I worked for my dad. He had a gutter business. So I didn't know what my next step was. And he's like, son, just come out and live with me and, kind of recalibrate. And so I was there for maybe 6 months. And it was during that time, that I had written a song that ended up, being a big part of the deal that I signed. And um, so I guess just kind of like rolling with the punches. Then I moved back to Nashville and took some meetings, and it was still a couple of years after that before things like officially came together and I was doing music for a living, like being paid to do it, not just working in restaurants. So I don't know. It's got to be the same with you and your bodybuilding. Like it's always there. It's always what I've leaned on. So I was chipping away at it, kind of whether I thought I was or not. It was just still like we talked about when I was a kid. It's just like where I've always gone to make sense and to process. And the irony is, my dad was an elusive figure, and he came in and out of my life much more out than in. So when I was out staying with him, I'd written a song about like a father and a daughter relationship, which I'd always thought I would have a daughter. And I think it was in the midst of my own pain because, I didn't see him a lot when I was out there. He kind of ignored me. I thought this would be like our time to really connect. And it was heartbreaking, to be out there. And then especially when our time came to an end and realized like it was completely wasted. And it was during that time I wrote this song about like an ideal. And that ended up, being a song that has opened up a lot of doors for me.
Sure.
So it's just, yeah, the journey is wild, like to say the least.
Well, and I know the other day when we were talking about Joseph Campbell's monomyth of the hero's journey,
Yeah.
and why do we gravitate to certain songs and gravitate to certain stories or movies or whatever, and we gravitate toward those when they're written authentically and written well. It's really telling that person's story about something, and
Hmm.
which then resonates with people who are then there's something in that story that is their story, right?
Hmm.
And so I think for me when it comes to music specifically, I'm much more of a lyric guy than I am, the tone or the tempo. I mean,
The vibe,
obviously
yeah.
that's part of it, but it's the storytelling that the song does is really what speaks to me. And
Hmm.
and if I'm gravitating toward a song, I'm in, and I think, if that song came out of what you were experiencing, some of the some of the insights that you were going through at that time, it doesn't it only makes sense to me that that would also then resonate with other people.
Hmm. Yeah, and just that it was the opposite of what I was going through, But yeah, so I moved back to Nashville. A couple of years went by. I sold insurance for a little while with my brother's company. That didn't end up going very well. And then yeah, I eventually signed a deal with Sony. Like everything kind of lined up. And yeah, everything made sense in hindsight. The journey of like what led me there, it all made sense. But there was a lot of bopping around and seeing my peers and my friends that I felt like I could keep up with, like signing deals, and I hadn't signed one. And yeah, it was just an interesting time for sure.
So with that, and again, part of the reason why, when we a month ago or whenever when we reconnected,
Yeah.
I really wanted, to have you share a little bit about your journey because of what we were saying earlier, that, you know, behind the scenes when talking to an artist or behind the scenes when talking to someone who is pursuing their passion, pursuing their, that their thing, right? As Campbell would talk about their bliss. Um, it is more of a circular trajectory than it is a straight line
Hmm.
an incline. And so, someone listening who's aspiring to either in singing or songwriting or whatever, getting a deal with Sony, that would be like, oh, I've made it now,
Hmm.
and then I can take my foot off the accelerator. What has been your experience with that?
It felt good for sure. It was very validating. Um, but I also think, something I've been thinking about a lot is just like our identity attached to like what we do. And I think there was definitely times, probably most of the time in Nashville, where it's like when things were clicking and the people I was playing for and working with were happy with what I was coming up with, like I felt great, and felt very confident. But when they weren't, um, it had too much of an effect on me. I allowed it to be too effective and really get me off track. Where it's just like, as an artist, and I'm sure with what you do too, it's just like as we've talked about, our identity, passionate, truth, like you put that into your work, and that seems to yield the best results and the most connection. But you got to kind of turn that off in certain instances to not take in something that's going to derail you or be too effective. Like it's like controlling the controllables. So I think that was something that I got better and better at, is just continuing to move forward. Um, but yeah, it is, as we talked about, it's an up and down business, and that's definitely something that I wish I would have been more resolute about, is just keeping my foot on the pedal and like rolling with the punches a bit better. And as we talked about, a few weeks ago, it's just it can be hard to value the seasons where you had to take a detour or you had to let your foot off the gas to like refine something, or refocus, I guess, or get in touch with like the core of what you're trying to do. So that's something that, these days I'm trying to be better about, is valuing those twists and those turns. It's like, man, that was a year that I kind of lost it and was too affected by the circumstance, and I want that back, and then I could be a year ahead of where I'm at now. But that it's just not how it works. And as we talked about the other day, if you keep like pushing forward and maybe not reflecting or being intentional about where things are going, or if they're in line, um, who cares if you're a year ahead? Like you're not where you're supposed to be, you
Yeah.
know? And that's just very valuable for me. I appreciated your reminder the other day with that, and just trying to focus more on that.
Well, and and I know that it was said to me at different time periods of my life, and I have said it and I've heard it, from people, is, there are no accidents, and
Hmm.
you're not accidentally right here right now at this time. And we are where we are, and it's about what are we going to do with that. And I think, you said something earlier about when do we making that transition from this is what I do to this is who I am.
Hmm.
And regardless of what's the external affirmation or validation about that, it's more about being true to that thing, right?
Hmm.
So like about sometime in the past year, I remember getting ready to go I don't compete anymore, but I do a lot of public speaking and workshops and presentation.
Yeah.
And and I remember going to this one particular um organization, and I remember thinking to myself, because there's always this little bit of energy that comes up, right? No, regardless of how often
Yeah.
I'm doing it, there's this energy that comes up. And I don't it would probably be overstating it if I said it was nerves, like nervousness. It's more like this is real, so you know that it's on, it's live, right? So there's
Hmm.
always a chance for something, to
Well, and that's something you can't prepare for either, right? You can run your presentation 100 times, but when you get up there, there is something that happens that only happens when you're up there. And you have to remember that and kind of expect it. Over the years, we get better at it. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, and it, all the preparation, all putting everything together and everything, and then what the thought came to me is like, Kevin, you're just sharing your thoughts and your observations
Hmm.
and inviting people into learning about that.
Hmm.
Nothing more, nothing less. That's all it is, right? And
Hmm.
and when I do that, when I remind myself of that, when I'm in that flow with it, then whatever the audience is, whatever they're supposed to get, that's what they get. I mean, they get what they're supposed to get if they're present, if they're open. It's you know, I had probably the biggest compliment, one of the biggest compliments I've ever got was from an educator a year ago or so. He said, I just got an hour and a half of therapy. And
Hmm.
I mean, I did this workshop.
That sounds like you, Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was a 90 minutes on resilience or whatever it was.
Oh,
But
cool.
it was all the things that I work with my staff with, work my counselors with my clients with about doing
Hmm.
those things. And it was like he said what I wanted people to get. So that
Hmm.
that was affirming, right? And but
Yeah.
but even if he wouldn't have said that, that's what he got. He happened to share it, so I
Hmm.
got to hear it. If he wouldn't have shared it, he still would have gotten that. I just wouldn't have known about it. And why do I have to make it about me?
Yeah.
It's because sometimes the people that are most moved by your music may not have the words at that moment to share it because they just don't have the words. They're too caught up in it. But that isn't as if it didn't happen, though.
Yeah. And that's something I wish I could do a bit better about is just kind of knowing I'm doing my part in like living with the results. Because as we talked about earlier, like the competitor in me is like, I want to destroy this. Like I want to get 100%, impact from everyone there, and maybe that's, I don't know if you think that's, a bad goal going in, or you start with that and then you're like, all right, I'll live with 40, or, in this instance, I was able to squeeze one drop out of this and that's all right. That was today, but tomorrow might be different.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll end with it as we segue toward the end, but I I did a talk just recently and it was about what's your story, hero or victim? And
Hmm.
in one of the elements of the characteristic of the hero of this story, being the hero of your own story, is about the amount of effort you put in regarding the preparation and then letting go of the outcome.
Huh.
And the the paradox of that, the dichotomy of that tension of 100% effort as if it's the most important thing in the world, and at the same time hanging on loosely, knowing that it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
You
Well,
know,
and that's, as we talked about earlier too, like the separation of yourself versus identity. Like that sounds like a very healthy separation of like, hey, I'm not what I do, like I'm gonna do my part and then I'm gonna like live with the results. It doesn't make or break me, how this goes today. I know I'm being truthful. I know I prepared. Every audience is different, every day is different. So yeah, that's definitely something I want to be better about.
so Clark, when you think back over the amount of time that you've been from the very economical guitar, that first guitar that you got,
It
when
was
you're
a POS, Kevin, let's just say it.
but it's still important to have it hanging on the wall because it's
Oh, I will
part of
never sell
everything.
it. It's like sitting right over there. Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say? What has the arts and music? What has that taught you about yourself that wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have never got into it?
That's a great question, Kevin. I think as maybe you can relate is I feel like, and especially since I started so young, it's like the process of songwriting and the passion I have for it has framed how I see the world, and how I problem solve and yeah, what resonates with me, I guess, because when you sit down to write a song, and I've never been someone who does it quickly. It takes time. It can take me, a month, months. And I think it's an attention to detail. It's having like a keen sense of what resonates with you, emotional moments. So I would say, yeah, more than anything, that's like what it has meant to me, and I like who it's kind of turned me into, and what it's made me pay attention to, and kind of make sense of the world. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, I think that, no, I think that's perfect, and when you think of, like, for anybody who's listening, either a parent that may have a child that's interested in maybe the arts, or someone who's listening who is finding themselves pulled into either arts or some other activity, what would you want them to know? If you could give them one thing, that you've learned along the way, what would you want them to either know or keep in mind?
well, what comes to mind first, and I'm not sure why, is, I had friends, maybe that were around my age that had a similar interest that I had, and they didn't get a POS guitar. They got like a $4,000, like they were given the world. And as I look back, it's like those people really didn't end up doing much. Like, I don't know if it was too much too fast, or, I'm kind of grateful I was given like a string, and I had to keep pulling, and then after I'd been playing for 10 years or something, I got a nicer guitar that you could actually plug in to a system. So I would say too much too fast maybe isn't the best thing. And as my mom would say too, I think it's important, like we were talking about with sports earlier. It's like, all right, if you're interested in soccer, like you got to finish that first season, like it's about commitment at the end of the day, or honoring. And then after that, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But I think that's an important lesson growing up as well. But yeah, I guess another thing, I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but I've told this story before. But when I kind of was starting to write in journal, and it was around the time that I met you, I grew up in a Christian home. Like, we did not swear or whatever, but I was just so frustrated with what was going on at home. And I had an entry that had like tons of F words in it. And it was just like F this, F that, and my mom found it. And I was so nervous about what she was going to do because I knew it was bad. But I remember her saying, like, Clark, I never want you to feel that you can't express yourself like in your writing, you know? And so I don't know necessarily what that advice is for parents. I'm sure you could verbalize it better than me, but kind of just being open to like kids finding their way, and gently keeping them in bounds, maybe. Because if she would have freaked out, then that maybe would have started some kind of a chain reaction to me of like, I can't be completely open in my music, or I can't express myself to a certain extent, which we talked about earlier. It's all about truth. That gives things the best chance to resonate. So I think that's another like crucial part of my story was that happening with my mom. So yeah, but ultimately, as we said, it's just I'm so grateful that I had a parent that was aware I was being pulled into something, and gave me like a gentle amount of resource to see how far that went. And she did the same with Drake, and that turned into other things. But just to have a parent who's aware, and trying to facilitate, and like you did with your daughter, like driving us to practice and driving me to guitar lessons, like that was just the biggest gift. And it's given me everything in my life. As I've said, worldview, a way to process, you know yeah, it's been great, and it all started with that.
Well, you said something kind of, I went through like a series of about 10 plus flashbacks real quick of
Sorry, it was a lot of talking, Kevin.
no, no, no. No, of situations where parents being concerned, fearful that their adolescent, their youth was there something wrong with them because they were either doing art with these
Yeah,
dark imagery, or what they were writing was dark, or whatever it was, and then they would come in with those concerns. And then, thank goodness felt like I had enough of a relationship with the youth that I could understand and contain the parents' concern, but also know that this was not some sign that they're going to become, uh,
Yeah.
a serial killer. It was not some
Yeah.
sign that they were in a clinical depression, that they may have been going through a time period, of a melancholy, but not necessarily
Huh.
a suicidal, I'm going to end my life,
Huh.
and the more that, to your point, the more that there was a container that was very conservative, the more that they almost needed to have that space to be able to, in this case,
Rebel kind of. Yeah.
or swear, or be unfiltered, right?
Huh.
And so it's almost like, taking the risk taking the risk to be able to do that, and then find out that you're not shamed or judged or squashed as a result of it, but doesn't necessarily give you permission to, say that in class to your teacher either.
That's right. It's a fine line, but that's interesting that kind of allowing, a little bit of drawing outside the lines is important because then if you restrict that, then it's like, well, now I really want to draw outside of the lines. So I'm sure it's a delicate dance. But I was so grateful with how my mom, because she knew I was going to reel it in, you know, I
Yep.
just was like kind of having a freak out, which I needed to do and I've needed to do over the years, but just her attention to that and wisdom in that moment, wisdom, like it really allowed me to connect with music and expression on like the deepest level, you
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. Well, Clark, if anyone who's listening or knows someone that, as they are listening, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you? Where would someone, if someone want to go, they're inspired to listen to some of your music, what's the best way to find your music? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
I would say it is clarkkellymusic.com. We just did an EP in the last year that I recorded remotely in in Rockford, acoustic vocal, and then I sent it to Nashville and had like a whole orchestra fill out the track. So I'm like super proud of that. So I'd love people to check that out if possible. And yeah, it's a great place to find like tour dates and putting out some new music in the next few months. So that'd be the best place to get in touch with me. Yeah.
So ClarkKelly music.
Music.com. That's right, Kevin.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Clark, again, as always, I enjoy our conversations, and I'm glad that you were there for our Christmas party. That was awesome.
Diane's the best, man. You did great.
Yep, and we were talking about that afterwards too for a long time. So again, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Kevin.
As we have with many of our guests, if for some reason there's something in Clark's story that kind of resonates with you, or someone that this may resonate with, definitely share this with them. Talk about this, because this journey, regardless if it's athletics or if it's in the arts or whatever the activity is, it is all those things helping us form who we are as our identity, to explore and check some things out. And like many things, it is where we're going to learn, and use as a template to navigate through life. As Clark was saying, as he's used this to write music, it's also the framework or template that he utilizes to see the world. As
Mm.
always, I appreciate you being here and look forward to being with you next week.